To Sarah Blake, we leave the Blake Tower in Manhattan, the family's entire portfolio, all luxury properties, and all other assets. The words hit me like a gut punch, but the real blow came when he turned to me. And to our younger daughter, Elizabeth Blake, we leave Cedar Ridge Ranch in Wyoming. I'm Elizabeth Blake, and I never stood a chance in the eyes of my family. From the moment I was born, it seemed I was destined to be the disappointment. My parents, Thomas and Olivia Blake, were financial moguls in New York City, constructing a sprawling empire of luxury real estate that dominated the skyline. The city was their playground, and they played it well, with high-end properties and sky-high profits. But they only had eyes for one person to carry on their legacy, Sarah, my older sister. She was poised, graceful, and perfectly in sync with their ambitions. Everything I wasn't. From an early age, it was clear. Sarah was their golden child. She was everything my parents could have ever hoped for. Me? I was the odd one, the misfit. While Sarah was constantly being groomed for the family business, I was drawn to a different path, one that had no place in their world. I found my passion in environmental sustainability and community development. I didn't care about high finance or managing portfolios. I cared about making a real difference. But that was never enough for them. To them, I wasn't just the second choice. I was the disappointment, the child who lacked ambition and vision. When my parents died suddenly in a plane crash, the world mourned the loss of two financial giants. Their legacy was celebrated in newspapers, on television, and across the business world. But for me, it felt like a cruel reminder of how invisible I had been to them. The media hailed their successes, their grandeur, their influence. But I was left with the painful knowledge that they had never truly seen me. Not for who I was, or what I had the potential to become. Their view of me, someone unworthy of their attention or approval, would haunt me for the rest of my life. The day the will was read, I sat at a polished mahogany table in a plush Manhattan law office. The space was a testament to their wealth. Sunlight streaming through tall windows, reflecting off the gleaming table where I sat, heart heavy in my chest. I could hear Sarah before I saw her. The click of her designer heels echoing in the hallway. When she entered, I couldn't help but notice how effortlessly she exuded confidence, her every movement radiating the sense that this moment, the inheritance, was meant for her. I knew what to expect. She always got everything she wanted. The lawyer, a stoic man in his 50s, adjusted his glasses and began reading the will. To Sarah Blake, we leave the Blake Tower in Manhattan, the family's entire portfolio, all luxury properties and all other assets. The words hit me like a gut punch. But the real blow came when he turned to me. And to our younger daughter, Elizabeth Blake, we leave Cedar Ridge Ranch in Wyoming. A ranch. In the middle of nowhere. I could barely hold the envelope containing the deed, my hands trembling. It felt like an insult, a final rejection. And then I heard it. Sarah's laughter, sharp and mocking, cutting through the silence. A ranch? She sneered. Maybe they thought you'd be better off with cows than investments. My stomach churned with humiliation. It was as though they had given me this worthless piece of land to send a message, to remind me of how small I was in their eyes. But I wasn't going to let them win. This ranch, this so-called failure of an inheritance, would not define me. It was time to uncover the truth about what they had left me, and what secrets this desolate land might hold. The weight of the will still clung to me as I walked out of the lawyer's office. The bitterness of that moment, the sting of Sarah's mocking laughter, the sting of being seen as the lesser daughter, was too much to bear. But I had made a decision then. I wasn't going to let this ranch be the final insult. I was going to find out what my parents had left me, what it meant, and why it had been given to me, of all people. The next morning, I boarded a flight to Wyoming, leaving behind the shiny streets of New York City for the vast, unforgiving desert plains. The flight seemed endless. As I stared out of the window, my mind raced, but my heart remained heavy. What kind of place was this ranch anyway? Why had they left it to me? Was it truly worthless, or had they hidden something there? When the plane landed, I rented an old truck and began the long, dusty drive. The miles stretched on, the landscape nothing but barren land and sparse, dry vegetation. I had heard of Cedar Ridge Ranch, but seeing it in person felt different, almost haunting. Hours passed before I finally saw it, a weathered wooden sign barely hanging on its last hinge. Cedar Ridge Ranch. It looked more like a ghost town than a place with a history, a legacy. The dry wind whipped through the air, carrying with it the scent of sand and forgotten dreams. This place, my father had always claimed, was a wasteland. He'd mocked it endlessly, belittling my grandfather's vision for it. My grandfather, Samuel Blake, had always believed in the ranch. He had grand ideas of what it could become, stories he used to share with me when I was young. But my father had dismissed them, calling the ranch a fool's dream. I stood there at the entrance, feeling the weight of those words settle on my shoulders. My father had never seen the value of this place, never believed in its potential. And, yet, here I was. The weight of his judgment, and the legacy of my family's failure, pressed on me. But something else began to stir inside. Maybe, just maybe, my grandfather had been right. Maybe this place had more to offer than anyone realized. The house was just as I imagined it. Old, worn, and empty. A two-story farmhouse, weathered by time and neglect. The floorboards creaked under my feet, and the air smelled of dust and years of abandonment. But there was something else. Something deeper. It was as though the land itself was calling to me, urging me to dig beneath the surface, to look closer. I explored the house, moving from room to room, sifting through the forgotten belongings of my ancestors. But it was the barn that caught my attention. It was larger than I remembered, its structure reinforced with beams that looked out of place. There was an eerie presence around it, as if it were hiding something. My grandfather had always told me there was something hidden in that barn. As a child, I'd laughed it off as fanciful stories. But now I had to know. I had to find out what he had been keeping secret all these years. I didn't waste any time. The old key my parents had left me felt heavy in my hand as I approached the barn door. It had been years since I had seen it, yet it seemed like yesterday that my grandfather had told me stories of his secret project, hidden within these walls. Despite my father's dismissal of it all, I had never quite let go of those stories. Something about them had always felt important. Now, standing here, I was determined to find out what he had left behind. I twisted the key into the lock, and the door creaked open with a groan, as if it, too, had been waiting for this moment. The air inside was cool, thick with dust, and smelled of old wood and metal. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the barn's aging walls, casting strange, shifting shadows over piles of forgotten crates and old machinery. Tools, ledgers, and various scraps lay scattered across the floor, left untouched for years. But it wasn't the dust or the forgotten relics that caught my attention. It was the pile of papers on a wooden table in the corner of the room. I walked toward it, my heart racing with anticipation. As I shuffled through the scattered papers, one particular set of journals caught my eye. They were handwritten, in my grandfather's unmistakable scrawl. The journals detailed a project he had worked on in the final years of his life. a project my father had ridiculed as worthless. But as I read, my breath caught in my throat. The project wasn't a failure. It wasn't a fool's dream, as my father had claimed. It was a pioneering discovery. One that could change everything. Samuel Blake had found one of the largest untapped lithium reserves in the country, hidden deep beneath Cedar Ridge Ranch. The thought seemed impossible at first, but as I continued to read, the enormity of it hit me. This wasn't just a piece of barren land. It was a gold mine, a treasure that no one knew about. Lithium. A critical element in the world's transition to sustainable energy, electric vehicles, and renewable technology. The demand for lithium was already skyrocketing, and my grandfather had discovered a vast deposit right here, under my feet. The more I read, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a forgotten ranch. This was an opportunity to change the world. But there was more. My grandfather hadn't just discovered the lithium. He had developed a method to extract it. One that was not only efficient, but environmentally friendly. His approach was light years ahead of its time. A sustainable solution that could revolutionize the entire industry. Long before the world was even aware of the environmental costs of lithium extraction, he had figured out how to reduce harm to the land. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was as if my grandfather had been working on something so significant, so impactful. And my father, my entire family, had never understood its value. My father had dismissed the ranch as nothing but a wasteland. Too blinded by his own greed to see the potential beneath his feet. I knew then that I couldn't let anyone know about this yet. Not my family. Not anyone. If they found out, they would stop at nothing to take control of it. I had to protect this discovery. To secure it before the world learned of it. But for now, this secret, this incredible secret, was mine alone. Time was not on my side. The moment I understood the gravity of my grandfather's discovery, I knew I had to move fast. If I hesitated, my family would find a way to claim what wasn't theirs. The stakes were too high. This wasn't just about proving my worth anymore. This was about protecting a legacy that could change the world. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of George Harrington, an attorney I had worked with on environmental contracts in the past. I had always trusted George to handle legal matters with discretion, and now I needed his help more than ever. "George, I need your expertise," I said. "There's a groundbreaking discovery, and I need to secure patents for it. Fast." He listened quietly as I explained, and without missing a beat, he agreed to help. His first task was to ensure the patents for my grandfather's lithium extraction method were protected. No one could be allowed to claim this as their own, especially not my family, who would see it as just another asset to control. Next, I reached out to Dr. Clara Mitchell, a renowned geologist who had advised me on environmental projects before. Clara's reputation was well known in the field, and she was the best person to validate the authenticity of the discovery. If anyone could confirm what my grandfather had found, it was her. Clara arrived at Cedar Ridge a few days later with her survey equipment. The air was thick with anticipation as she spent hours combing over the land, taking samples and analyzing every inch of the property. When she finally returned to me, her face was a mixture of shock and excitement. "Elizabeth," she said, her voice trembling. "This is huge. I've never seen anything like it. This is the largest lithium deposit I've ever come across. If your grandfather's method works as described, it could change the world." I felt a surge of relief wash over me. This wasn't just a hidden treasure. It was a game changer. the magnitude of it all started to settle in. My grandfather hadn't been foolish after all. He had been ahead of his time. But I couldn't do this alone. The discovery was too important, and it needed the right kind of support to bring it to life. I turned to Ethan Wallace, a venture capitalist known for funding revolutionary technologies. He was cautious at first, skeptical of a lithium project coming out of nowhere. But once I shared the data and Clara's findings with him, his skepticism evaporated. "This is big," he said, his eyes lighting up. He signed on immediately. Terralith Solutions was born that day. We moved quickly, setting up a shell company to ensure the project remained anonymous. The last thing I needed was my family finding out too soon. With funding secured, we began the process of building a state-of-the-art lithium extraction facility at Cedar Ridge Ranch. The transformation was nothing short of extraordinary. What my family had once dismissed as a worthless desert was rapidly becoming the hub of a groundbreaking operation. In just a few months, Cedar Ridge had gone from a forgotten relic to a beacon of innovation. We had harnessed the potential of the land, and the world would soon take notice. But the real work was just beginning. The race was on, and I was determined to make sure Terralith Solutions didn't just succeed. It would revolutionize the industry. As Terralith Solutions grew, I knew it wouldn't be long before my family caught wind of what I had built. My father's empire, once the only thing they cared about, had to have felt the tremors of my success. Sure enough, Sarah called me one morning, her voice tight with tension. "Elizabeth," she said. "Is Terralith your operation? The whole business world is talking about it. I need you to confirm it." There was desperation in her voice, the kind that said she feared losing control of something she couldn't understand. She wasn't interested in the operation. I could hear it in her tone. She wanted to take credit for it, to claim ownership the way she had with everything else in her life. But I wasn't about to let that happen. I answered her coldly. "Yes, it's mine," I replied, feigning indifference. "Why do you ask?" I could feel her frustration through the phone as she tried to convince me to partner with her, to let her use her connections to take Terralith to the next level. The offer was laced with manipulation, the same tactics she had used all her life to stay on top. But I wasn't that same vulnerable sister anymore. I saw through her. "No, Sarah," I said firmly. "I'm doing this on my own." Not long after, Aunt Beatrice, the family's behind-the-scenes power broker, challenged my ownership of the patents through legal channels. My heart raced, but I knew I had been prepared for this. The patents were locked under Terralith's name, far removed from the Donovan legacy. My family's legal threats were crushed in an instant. But that wasn't the final blow. The real blow came when Sarah's once glittering real estate empire collapsed under the weight of her failed investments. To cover her mounting debts, she was forced to sell her penthouse, a property that had once symbolized her power. I saw my chance. I bought it for a fraction of its value. When Sarah called a few weeks later, her voice dripping with desperation, asking to buy it back, I met her in a quiet cafe. "Please, Elizabeth," she begged. "Just a little more time. I can pay you back." I stared at her, a faint smile tugging at my lips. "You remember that day in the attorney's office?" "Sarah?" I asked coldly. "When you laughed at me and my inheritance?" "Well, here we are." In that moment, I realized my victory wasn't about getting revenge. It wasn't about making Sarah pay for her cruelty. It was about proving to myself that I could build something real. Something that mattered. Cedar Ridge Ranch, once discarded and mocked, had become the foundation of a billion-dollar company. And I had done it on my terms, without my family's approval or support. As I watched Teralith Solutions rise, I realized something important. Sometimes the greatest success comes from the places you least expect. What they had written off as worthless had become my greatest triumph.